God, I hate going over Matt Walsh.
Now, if you are not the perceptive sort, you might listen to all this and say, well, this is unfair to gay couples. What if they want to have children? What are they supposed to do? Don't we need to have some kind of system in place to help them achieve their parenthood dreams? The answer to that question is no, we don't. Homosexual unions are sterile by their nature. It's not an exception to the rule when they are. It's not the result of sickness or genetic defect when a homosexual couple is unable to have children. None of them are able or have ever been able or ever will be able. That is a sign from nature.
What no understanding whatsoever of philosophy does to a mother. Hey, if we're looking for signs from nature, what about a woman who's born infertile? Like, is that not a sign from nature? Or what if there is a gay couple and they like have a surrogate mother and one of the gay guys impregnates her like normally and then she produces a child and they raise them, you know? Again, you have to twist yourself into such insane pretzels from Walsh's perspective to try to argue anything other than what his actual position is, which is like, you know, gay people are just innately degenerate. That's the only thing he actually believes, but they have to twist themselves into pretzels being like, oh, well, actually, it's like, well, nature is saying this isn't normal, but these other times nature says it is different. That's a different thing with nature, but also when this thing happens, that's also bad. Like, if he could just say what he believes, which is gay people are degenerate and deserve to die, then that would be the coherent argument that he would put forward, you know? That would be like the straightforward position that he would hold. But he can't say that, at least not yet, so... Just before you paused, he said that's an exception and therefore infertile women should be allowed to adopt. Yeah, that's completely, like, irrational. What is that? So we're deferring to sort of natural argument for who can or cannot raise children, but then we're actually talking about the ability to birth children, but then we're making exceptions for natural exceptions by saying that it's different actually because you belong to a category that has been naturally exempted as opposed to infertile women, which isn't a category of women somehow. It's just another thing, you know, it doesn't mean, like, again, he doesn't believe it either, you know? You could argue with him for 30 minutes trying to find caveats, and the only, like, consistency to the caveats would be that he just thinks that, you know, it's specifically gay people. That's it. Like, there's no real logic there. It's why they don't do debates anymore, by the way. It's why we can't do debates with conservatives anymore.
About as glaring and obvious as signs as you can ever see that gay couples are not meant to have kids. They're not meant to have kids because they cannot ever have kids, because kids are meant to have both a mom and a dad. Now, it's true that plenty of kids end up with just one of those or sometimes none, but this just means that something went wrong. In that case, you do the best you can to compensate. But
see, notice now how he's willing to excuse other natural signs you shouldn't be raising children, like being infertile. But then, you know, we appeal to the a man and a woman are supposed to raise children bit, when in human society before modern civilization, children were raised tribally. See, children are birthed by a man and a woman, you know, assuming everyone's cisgender, I guess. But raised is an entirely different thing. Would that mean then that it's like unnatural for a kid to be raised by, say, their grandparents? Like if their parents die, is being raised by their grandparents unnatural? You could make naturalistic arguments for that, you know? No, you're supposed to be raised by people 1 generation above you. 2 generations above you is unnatural. You're not learning the right lessons. They're too old to give you the proper, blah, blah, blah. Like, when you're arguing in this way, you're literally just making up the rules on the fly. There's no actual, yeah. This is like saying diabetics aren't real humans because they need external insulin. As a general rule, anybody who's making moral arguments that trace back to nature or what people should be, they neither understand nature nor like humans. You know, they don't actually understand. Yeah, the modern nuclear family is just that modern. It's only like 100 years old. Less, actually. The modern nuclear family, as we understand it, is like a post-World War II suburban construction. If you go back to the early 20th century, a lot of people who lived in cities lived in packed tenements, you know, where you would have multiple families stuffed together in a house, and you would have like larger communities of people who would work like 80-hour weeks, and then you would just like the kids would just kind of roam around as feral, marauding packs of dirty tweed-wearing dipshits who would like pathologically archaeologic tier shit where they would find like little cubby holes under tin roofs to split up all the acorns they found that day. They were feral little beasts, and then they would grow up, and at the tender old age of 5, they would go work in a coal mine or something, you know? Like, that was nature 100 years ago. And then 100 years before that, it was different. And then 100 years before that, it was before the Industrial Revolution. And back then, it was all like, you know, communal village shit in some areas. And in other areas, there were still, you know, sometimes family roles mean go to London and die of cholera. Appeal to nature arguments are dumb and always have been dumb. Also, you can make a lot of arguments against like trad stuff that way, because you would think like logically that multi-generational households are trad, right? Because you like have your venerable ancestors with you. But that's more of a non-American trad thing. In America, we have this absurd obsession with individualism to the point of rejecting community and family. So the trad thing here in America is to like immediately get a job out of high school, move out, buy a house, and then build your own suburban white family. But so like in that case, it's like actually anti-trad to live with your parents, even though in a place like, I don't know, Mexico, it might be considered trad to do that because it's multi-generational. Like, does this make sense? We understand how like appeals to nature are really dumb, right? That's why appeals to nature are literally like a go-to thing to make fun of people for. It's like conflating causation and correlation. It's one of the like default things that people are trained on to recognize and make fun of. Appeal to nature from the invalid wearing glasses. Literally, like you could make as valid of an argument there. Matt Walsh wears glasses. He shouldn't. His poor vision is a sign from nature and God that he was not meant to see. If he dies, so be it. That's nature. Why would you pervert the natural order? You know, you weren't meant to see. Like you could do, literally, you could do this with anything. It's stupid. Appeal to nature is like saying common sense. The thing it's just whatever they like. I actually think the common sense appeals are better, because at least in that case you're acknowledging the fact that you're pointing to intuition, whereas the appeal to nature is this like pretentious pseudo-philosophical effort to distract from the fact that you're just pointing to intuition, you know?
With surrogacy, we are designing children from the outset to be motherless or fatherless. We are intentionally depriving them.
There are plenty of surrogate mothers who hand the children over to heterosexual couples, but okay. Yeah, straight couples do surrogacy. Also worth noting, by the way, that by all of the metrics that we have and have found, people who are raised to homosexual parents tend to have equal or better life outcomes than those raised to heterosexual parents. And this is in spite of the social stigma. In all likelihood, this is largely a class distinction, because gay couples capable of adopting are more likely to be middle or upper class than, you know, heterosexual parentage, which could be literally any class, of course. But still, no evidence has been found that it leads to worse life outcomes. Can you up the volume? Is it too quiet? Sure, I'll up the volume. There we go.
Of what they are supposed to have. You know, it's true that some children grow up with one arm or no arms.
That's true. Also, okay, here's a question, all right? I wonder how Matt Walsh would feel if there was a man, a woman, and another man or woman, not in a polyamorous relationship, but what about like a very active godfather or godmother? That's also pretty trad. Like maybe you have two very busy working parents, but they're like, you know, they have like a sort of well-to-do friend, and they, you know, they trust him very much. So you have like a godfather or godmother who, or like an uncle or an aunt or whatever, you know? Is that then bad? What if you have like a mom who raises the kid and an aunt who helps raise the kid, or like a grandmother, but the father's always out busy? Isn't that functionally like getting raised by two women? Like seriously, if kids are supposed to be raised by both a man and a woman, why do cons always argue that guys should be out working all day so the mother can take care of them? Like you're not really being raised by the guy, you're being funded by the guy. That's kind of different, you know? What if it's the dad's always out working, like at an oil rig or whatever, but then you have the mom and her sister, you know, an aunt. Is that not being raised by two women? My guess, and I'm just guessing here, my guess is that Matt Walsh would defend this hypothetical because it does not involve homosexuality. I don't think Matt Walsh, or in fact any conservative, really cares that much about the whole kids need to be raised by a man and a woman thing, because I don't think they believe it. Because if they actually believed it, they would argue for paternal leave. They would argue for men and women to both spend a fair amount of time with kids and not like guys spending their entire lives working so that the woman can take care of the kid, you know? I think they just don't like homosexuals. Just a guess of mine. Slight vibe that I'm picking up here. Please turn Matt Walsh back down. I don't want to hear him. True. They would probably claim that the minor presence of the father is still enough because of straight magic. Yeah, I think their argument, like logically, or is sort of not logically, but internally in their own logic would be that the role of the father is to be this kind of like distant, stern figure who funds everything and acts as the kind of like soft patriarch of the family. So even if they're doing that from a distance and have no real connection to the kid, that's still being raised by a dad, which is really indicative, I think, of how much psychosexual nonsense is built up in fascism. The idea that the like obligatory male role in parentage is to be distant and unloving because that like sort of facilitates the masculine archetype just as well as them actually being there and present. That if they are away, what matters is that they're away and stern, you know? This merges so perfectly with capitalist shareholder worship. Well, a lot of fascist gender roles is just making people perfect vessels for the state. It's the same reason why Nazi Germany tried to fund women to have more children, you know? Fascists love that, as long as they're white women, of course, you know, and having white kids. The obsession with turning guys, like men, into machines whose job it is to work and die in the army, and women into like baby-making factories. Fascism ultimately is subservience to the state. So the roles that they're shaping for you are ones of ultimate cuckoldry. You're giving your lives for the purpose of the state. Babies to fuel the economy and the soldiers, you know, soldiers to die for the war, or to be workers in the factories. It always works out that way. Is he white? Matt Walsh? I don't claim him.
But that obviously doesn't make it any more horrific or any less horrific or barbaric.
All right, we're talking about a kid who's born without arms.
To intentionally chop a child's arm off.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the fact that some children end up that way, yes, but a child is supposed to have two arms at birth. And to intentionally design a child to only have one, we would all agree it's like mad scientist horror. But this is essentially what we're doing with commercial surrogacy.
Arm chopping equals gay? Yeah, it doesn't really make much sense, does it? But again, when the real underlying belief is just like gay people are degenerate and it's wrong to be gay, like you can make basically any comparison. It doesn't really matter because like you're basically just comparing bad to bad. There's not any real like analysis taking place here, you know? It's not like you have to put much thought into it. Yeah, but doesn't his God make one-armed kids have one arm? Yeah, but this is a classic religious thing. Like if bad things happen because of God, then God has a plan. It's his design. It's not their right to question. That's not like a thing you can really challenge them on.
And only it's worse because it's far better for a child to be raised lacking one of his arms than to be raised lacking one of his parents.
That's true. If you ask any kid who was raised by gay parents and say like, hey, the trauma must be unbearable. If you could have gone back in time and done it all again, except one of your two loving parents was a different gender, and also you're missing your left arm, would you do that? I bet you all of them would say yes. That's true. Wow, that's insanely retarded. Yeah, it really is. Really makes you wonder, you know? Again, this is one of the reasons. Remember how I said before that I felt Republicans were consolidating too soon? They were like doubling down on their bigoted rhetoric too aggressively and not doing enough outreach to try to bring more people in. I still think they're doing that, you know? How many normal people would listen to this and agree with it? Seriously, what appeal do you think actually chopping a kid's arm off would be better than them being raised by a gay couple? Like, how many normal people do you think are going to listen to this and go like, oh, wow, I've always felt that kind of... Too many? Well, if the answer is at least one, then it is indeed too many, but I don't think many would. I don't think these analogies speak to a person who's making much of an effort to try to, like, win people over, you know? The more you commit to bigoted rhetoric, the more you circle the drain. The same thing happened to Steven Crowder. The same thing happens to almost all of them. One of the only people who's been consistent enough to avoid this kind of, like, anti-purity death spiral is Ben Shapiro. And that's because, though he is certainly a fascist, he's not, like, a full-on like fervent lunatic Nazi type, like a lot of the people that he works with. And as a consequence of that, he does engage in some kind of moderation with his rhetoric, you know? He still plays the whole facts and logic game. He's still a fascist, he's still a bigot, to be sure, but like every other conservative commentator has, you know what I mean? You guys understand what I mean, right? Like so many conservative commentators, like a couple of years ago, you would watch their stuff and they would be like, we have questions that the media is not willing to answer with regards to the treatment of transgender youth, if that's even a thing that's possible. We're concerned with their well-being and are looking into the research to find out whether these children are being abused. And then you look at their rhetoric these days and it's psycho. Like every third news article about a conservative pundit these days has something to do with them or someone associated with them doing something Nazi related. And then like you watch their shows and it's like watching Alex Jones. Like it appeals entirely to people who are already in the whirlpool, you know? They've consolidated. They closed ranks too early. They're not bringing in new people. Blair White, was like the big experiment in can we do the like outreach bit, you know, like even on that angle, but they don't even engage with that anymore, you know? Remember when what's that dipshit's name, the makeup dipshit, the twink, the extremely skinny person, the person who probably brags that they're good at throwing it back but probably isn't? Not James Charles, not Ollie London, no, Jeffree Star. Remember when Jeffree Star said some like anti-woke shit because he's a stupid idiot and conservatives were like, we don't claim this degenerate? Remember that? You have any idea how much mileage they could have gotten out of Jeffree Star's audience with the like shared conservative rhetoric? And they just didn't, because they're no longer capable of entertaining turncoats, you know? They can't have people like that in their ranks anymore because they're too radicalized to even like engage with others. It's a failure of coalition building, you know? First and foremost. It's so weird because they love entertaining racial turncoats. Yes, because they've consolidated on the gender and sexuality. They can entertain racial turncoats. There are a ton of racists in the right wing, but they can still look at like Candace Owens and go, oh yeah, you know, but she's one of the good ones. But they can't do that with trans people anymore. They can't even do it with gay people anymore, you know? They committed too hard to the anti-trans, anti-gay rhetoric. It keeps them from doing work they would otherwise need to do to bring people over. I still think that Jeffree Star thing was a huge fumble. Jeffree Star is a piece of shit who likes money more than anything. Daily Wire could have given him, I don't know, $500,000 to do like 3 videos with them, pull over his makeup audience to hear about how, you know, woke media won't tell you the truth about the makeup industry or something, and maybe pull over, I don't know, 10,000, 20,000 people, you know, something. That's not nothing. Better, you know, that's a better use of your money than your average ad buy, but they didn't. They couldn't. They're no longer capable.
And that's why I will never applaud and cheer when we get these birth announcements from gay couples, because I'm more concerned.
Like Dave Rubin, like when they attacked Dave Rubin because he and his husband adopted a kid. They don't really seem eliminationist about black people like they are with queer people. Yeah, that is true. The mainline conservative attitude towards queer people is eliminationist. The radical fringe of the right also is eliminationist about non-white people, but they are absolutely not the forefront. And the reason for that, I think, is because they recognize the fact that while they have been able to pull a kind of rhetorical hat trick with queer people, an openly white supremacist, white nationalist Republican Party would lose an ungodly number of voters. You know, there is just no way for them at this moment to go up there on stage and say the kinds of stuff they say about queer people about black people without immediately tanking. They're just not there. Maybe one day they will be. But the God's honest truth is that America is pretty multicultural, and your average Republican voter might be latently racist, but they're definitely not an active ideological racist. The median Republican voter might think trans people are grooming children, and even that is a maybe, because the anti-trans rhetoric has not been winning them over as well as Republicans thought it would. But the median Republican voter definitely does not think, like ideologically in their head, that America should be an only white nation. They might think, I don't know, the downtown area they used to like has been full of thugs lately or something, or they might think that like rap and hip hop is like, I don't know, barely even music or whatever. They probably hold a lot of opinions that are racist, but I don't think they're ideologically racist. They're not aware of their racism and committed to it on principle. Does that make sense? Whereas I think a greater proportion of Republicans are willing to go that far when it comes to like anti-trans stuff, where they will just say, yes, I think that being trans is a mental illness, and yes, I think they, shouldn't be allowed to groom kids or whatever. Like they'll just say that, But yeah, there are plenty of GOP racists.
Concerned about what the child needs than what those men want.
Yes. Is disliking rap really inherently racist? No, and I didn't say that. I said that it's probably racist to think it's not music, which is a Ben Shapiro opinion. It's honestly such a blessing that American fascists are too stupid to effectively wield and gain power. That's fascism. All over, that's fascism. Fascists are very bad at critically analyzing the world around them and arriving at good conclusions as a consequence of that. Irrationality is a part of fascism, always and forever. Some are more competent than others. For example, I would say Viktor Orban is a pretty great example of a competent fascist, and I think that his regime has done a lot of effective work when it comes to destroying Hungarian democracy. But for the most part, like, as a general rule, fascists just aren't competent, My extremely white father is like, I can't stand rap, it makes me want to puke, but people who say it isn't art make me want to puke even more. Yeah, that's me. That's me with country music, My position on country music is that I hate it, makes me want to puke, and I don't think it's art. I'm kidding. I do hate country music, though.